Hi everyone. So, this is a tutorial exploring or explaining how to get a custom character into Unreal Engine using the Unreal Engine 4 Mannequin Skeleton. Okay, so this is for Blender and Unreal Engine 4 users, and in this tutorial I'm going to be using Blender 2.79. Now I hope that doesn't disappoint some people, because I know some of you guys out there are using Blender 2.8. But hopefully the principles and the techniques shown here in this tutorial are fundamentally exactly the same in Blender 2.8. Okay, so just by understanding the workflow, even in 2.79 you can still apply that workflow in 2.8. It's just the user interface is slightly different. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go through the entire workflow from Unreal Engine, getting the mannequin from Unreal Engine, taking that mannequin into Blender, adding a custom character to it, and then taking that custom character out of Blender and back into Unreal Engine and getting it into Unreal Engine so it works with the mannequin. It works with the mannequin and the skeleton, or sorry, works with the skeleton and all of the animations. Okay, cool. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new Unreal Engine project. Okay. And I'm using Unreal Engine 4 22.3, but you can use any version of Unreal Engine as long as it's after Unreal Engine 4.8, because Unreal Engine 4.8 was when the Unreal Engine 4 Mannequin was introduced. Okay, so I'm just going to make a new project. I'm going to use a blueprint third-person template, and I'm just going to call this project UE4 UE4 Skeleton Tutorial. There we go. Let's take a moment to load. Excuse me. Cool. Alright, so here's Unreal Engine, and the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take the Unreal Engine 4 Mannequin and export him from Unreal Engine. So there's the Mannequin skeletal mesh. I'm just going to right click on it and go Asset Actions, Export, and I'm going to put it in a memorable folder. Blender tutorial, custom character. Now I've already got one there, okay, so I've already exported it, but I'm just going to overwrite that one. It's exactly the same. There we go. So I'm just going to overwrite it. That's fine. Now you can uncheck collision. You don't need the collision, you don't need level of detail, and you don't need the vertex color. That just makes life a bit simpler. The export compatibility should be default, and click export. There we go. Okay, cool. So let's make an open up a new copy of Blender. And so we're going to import the mannequin and the skeleton into Blender and take a look at it. Port FBX. And there's our FBX. Import. Alright. So there we go. We've got the Unreal Engine 4 mannequin in Blender. Now I want to talk a little bit about what this specifically is. Okay, so this is a skeletal mesh, right? And what a skeletal mesh is, it's a mesh. That's a mesh with a skeleton. That's all a skeletal mesh is. That's the fundamental principle of a skeletal mesh. Okay. Skeletal mesh is a term used in Unreal Engine 4. However, in Blender there's another component here which some people may not notice at first look, and it's because it's kind of difficult to notice. And what that is that right down here in the scene root there is this empty. Okay, now I don't know why that empty is there. It's to do with the way that Unreal Engine 4 exports the mannequin. But the thing is that we don't want this empty. Okay, this empty can cause problems with exporting your character. Okay, and the reason is, one of the reasons why is because this empty is the parent, right, of the mesh and the skeleton, right? So this mesh and the skeleton is parented to this empty. Okay. Yeah, and we just don't want it. It just causes problems. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that empty. Okay, and it really, you don't need it for anything, so don't worry that it's deleting. But however, when I delete it, something's going to happen, right? And I'm just going to, what's going to happen is that the mesh and the skeleton's going to get 100 times bigger. And I'm just going to explain why that is, right? If you look over here in the properties panel, and I've got the empty selected, right, you can see that it has a uniform scale, but it's scaled down. It's got a 0.01 scale, which means it's 100 times smaller than it actually is, right? Now, because the mesh and the skeleton are parented, right, they are children of this empty, right, they inherit the scale of the empty, right? So when I delete the empty, they're going to be no longer constrained by it, and they're going to get really big. Okay, so let's do that. Let's just delete the empty, and as you can see, they've got really big. Now we don't want them to be this big, so I'm just going to scale them down. So I'm using the 3D cursor as the pivot, and it's in the center of the world. I'm just going to, scale it down by 0.01, and I'm going to go to edit mode and do the same thing with the skeleton. Okay, so that's the first fix that we've got there, right? So we've got our skeleton. So all we've got in the scene now, right, is the mesh and a skeleton, and that's all we want. Okay. Now we want to add a custom character to that skeleton. So we don't want this guy. We could, for example, now export just this guy, just the mannequin, and take him back into Unreal Engine 4. Let's just try that and see if it works. Okay. So I'm just going to go through export FBX. Now the FBX export options are really important. Okay. It's useful to always use selected objects. That's a really good thing. It means it's only going to export the objects you have selected, and I've got them both selected, so that's great. But when you're exporting a skeletal mesh, you really need to pay attention to this setting, add leaf bones. Okay, this setting is completely useless, and you want to uncheck it. So add leaf bones should always be unchecked. On the animation tab, if you're not exporting any animations, you should uncheck baked animations. Okay, because it's just going to make things simpler. If you are exporting animations, you don't want to uncheck that, obviously, but you will still want to uncheck add leaf bones. All right, but in this case, I'm going to uncheck both of those and check selected objects. All right, so I'm just going to put this into the folder, and I'm just going to call this UE4 Mannequin Blender Exported. All right. Now we can go back into Unreal Engine. I'm just going to make a new folder, Blender Exported, and import that guy back in. So obviously this is not the goal to just export the mannequin into Blender and then export him out again, but I'm just showing that hopefully this works. Right, it should work. So if you did want to do that, you can. Okay. We get the import options. Now, first thing, I mean, you don't have to uncheck import textures and do not create materials. I'm just going to do that. It doesn't really matter. Okay, and I'm going to choose the UE4 Mannequin Skeleton and import. Right, and that's worked fine. Great. Okay. So he's actually inherited. This is right. So this is the actual FBX that I've exported from Blender. He's just inherited. It sort of automatically recognized his material slots and has automatically slotted in the materials. Now, if we go to bones, we can see that his skeleton is exactly the same as the skeleton that you normally have on the actual mannequin. Right, they're exactly the same. And I'll tell you what, I'm just gonna, oops. What? Sorry. Excuse me. Right, there we go. I'm just going to uncheck his materials so we can differentiate him, right? And now we can check that preview mesh. Right, okay. He's 100 times too small. Right, why is that? So, that's a problem. And it's a problem that needs to be explained. And it's good that we've got to this now. Okay. So let's go back into Blender. In order to fix that problem, what we need to do, okay, because Blender and Unreal Engine don't use exactly the same scale settings. Okay, so even though the skeleton has a has a scale of 1 and the mesh has a scale of 1, do you remember at the beginning we had that empty and it scaled everything down by 100 times, right? So what we need to do is we need to scale this up 100 times, right, and change the unit presets in Blender. All right, so I'm just going to scale this guy up, S100, and do the same for the skeleton, S100. Oops, excuse me, S100. I did minus 100, right? So there's the mannequin and the skeletal mesh, and I'm just going to change the unit presets to metric, but I'm going to change the unit scale to 0.01. Right? Now this may all be a bit confusing mathematically, but it works, and these are the correct settings, so just trust me, I've done this loads of times. Okay. Alright, so let's try this again. So export him. I'm just going to overwrite that file. Right? And I'm going to re-import this guy. Re-import. Okay, and the image got really big, but that's going to reset itself, so don't worry. Okay, so hopefully now this is going to work. Yes, right, okay, so it's worked, right? So now we've exported the Unreal Engine 4 mannequin out of Unreal Engine into Blender, and then exported him again from Blender back into Unreal Engine. And this is, you know, this is a custom, well, this is not a custom mesh, this is the mannequin, but we've exported him correctly, all right? And he works with all the animations, and he's basically exactly the same as the original mannequin. But obviously we want a custom character. Okay, we don't want to use the mannequin, so let's take a look at getting a custom character onto the skeleton. Okay, close this one, go back into Blender. So we don't want the mannequin anymore, let's delete him. Now bear in mind, because I have changed the scale, right, I'm kind of working at 100 times larger than Blender's usual unit scale, right? So yeah, okay, so just bear that in mind, right? So I'm going to append a custom character from my other file, and this guy's called Stickman, and now he's 100 times too small, right? I'm just going to scale him up, S100, there we go. Now this is just a Stickman, okay, so this is like a crap custom character, but the reason why I'm using this very simple, super simple custom character is just to show the process of getting a custom character onto the skeleton and into Unreal Engine. All right, we're gonna start with a simple character first, and then I'm gonna talk about a more complex character afterwards. All right. So let's just start with a simple character. Now the thing is that I've created this character previously, and this character already has, right, a set of vertex groups, right, which means that I've already assigned bone weights to all of the parts of this character, right? So for example, if I select, right, lower arm, okay, yeah, let's go with lower arm R, right, it's going to select those vertices, okay, and those bones are bound to that bone, which is lower arm R, right, and I can rotate that. Okay, so no, I haven't bound him to the skeleton yet, but he already has those vertex groups. Now why when I move the bone doesn't his arm move, right? Was because he's not bound yet. Okay, I've only just imported him. He does, however, already have an armature modifier, right, from previously. Now I can delete this armature modifier. He keeps his vertex groups, right? He currently does not have a parent. The Stickman, you see here it says parent. He doesn't have a parent. Okay. So the simple thing to do to bind him is I click on the Stickman, and then I shift select the skeleton, and I press Control P, set parent to. Now if I choose automatic weights, it's going to recalculate all of those vertex groups. Now in this case I don't want it to do that. okay, I want it to use the vertex groups he's already got. Okay, so I'm going to do with empty groups, which means that it won't overwrite or it won't change any of the vertex group information. Right, so now if I click on him and we go back to the armature modifier, we can see that he is bound to the object root in the armature modifier, and he also has the parent root, okay, which is the skeleton. All right, so now if I go into pose mode and I move one of the bones, you can see that his arm follows it. Okay, so we've successfully bound this custom character to the skeleton. Okay, and that's literally it. We can export him now. All right, and let's do that. Let's see what happens. So file, export, FBX, and it will have remembered the settings from previously. Okay, and I'm just going to call this Blender Stickman. Let's call him Blender Stickman. There we go. And it's funny, it's got a really big icon. Don't worry about that, it's just a bug. Right. Let's import the Stickman, and I'm going to choose the UE4 mannequin, and there we go. No smoothing groups, that's to do with the mesh, nothing to do with the animations. Mesh Stickman has no UV set, he hasn't been UV unwrapped. Don't worry about those things, nothing to do with skeletal meshes, right? However, we can open him up now, and you can also see that his smoothing group information is wrong, but let's not worry. Well, actually we can take a look at fixing that in a second. He's like smooth shaded, which is wrong. That's not how he's shaded in Blender. So, but anyway, let's just check that he works with the animations, right? Oops, wrong one. What have I done? Sorry. All right, but there we go. He's working. Okay. So that is a custom character. That's a fully custom character. It's a very simple custom character, but it is a custom character. Let's just take a look at the smoothing groups. Smoothing group, so we can fix smoothing groups by changing the import options, or we change the shading by changing the import options. Okay, so I'm just actually going to delete that guy and import him again. And you need to open up this drop-down menu. And you've got normal import model. So the default is compute normals. I'm going to change that to import normals, and the normal generation method is usually the default is Mickey T space, but I'm going to change that to built-in. And I'll select the skeleton again. There we go. Okay, this is just another error about the shading, which doesn't really matter, but that will have fixed the shading on his mesh, right? So now you can see he's all like hard shaded. That is the setting that you should use when importing skeletal meshes from Blender. If you want to get the correct shading, you should change the setting to import normals and the normal generation method to built-in, right? Okay, so that's worked. So, but this is a very simple character. Let's take a look at getting a more complicated character in there, right? Now, obviously, in this case, I've already assigned all of the vertex groups to this guy previously, but let me just show you really quickly how to assign a vertex group. Okay, so right now, if I go into pose mode and I click on the lower arm _L bone, I can rotate it and his arm moves. Okay, that's because he's got the vertex groups, and those vertex groups are correctly assigned. So lower arm there, right? Lower arm _L, and those are the vertices that are associated with it. Now I'm just going to quickly show you how to assign those. All right. So I'm going to actually remove those from this vertex group just to show you how to add them back again. Now that I've removed them, if I rotate this bone, you can see that his hand still moves, but his arm doesn't move anymore, right? Because I've removed that vertex group. So I'm just going to add it back in again. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the mesh that I want to add in edit mode, and click assign, right? So those vertices have now been assigned to that vertex group, and I can select them, and it works again. Okay, cool. So that shows how to get a, like, really, and I've manually done that for all of the pieces of this character, and you kind of, you could use automatic weights, but they kind of only work. They don't work that great. It's better to do the weight, the weight assigning manually. All right, and I'm just going to talk about that a bit more now with a slightly more complicated character. Okay, so we don't need this guy anymore. We've already got him into Unreal Engine. Let's look at a more complicated character. So I'm actually just going to append from another blend file. Okay, so I've got a kind of humanoid character here. And once again, he's 100 times too small. Let's scale him up 100 times. And this guy's like a proper human, right? Now, once again, this is a character that I've built previously, and he's already been weighted to the skeleton, right? So we can actually, and then we could just do the same method again, right? So let's just start from the beginning again. There's the mesh. There's the skeleton. Does he have a... Oh, he doesn't have an armature modifier, and he doesn't have a parent, okay? But he does have the vertex groups, right? Which means that the vertex groups have already been assigned previously, right? Okay. So I select the mesh. I select the shift select. Oh, I need to go into object mode. I select the mesh, shift select the skeleton, control P with empty groups, because he's already got the vertex groups. And now he should be bound properly and move as we would want him to move. Okay. We can do that with any of the bones. Alright, it looks a bit janky because it's obviously it's not a proper animation, but as you can see, it is working, right? So now we've got this, we've got this more complicated custom character. All right, I'm just going to, and let's try getting this guy into Unreal Engine. Okay, so select the mesh, select the skeleton, file, export, FBX. It will remember the settings. We'll call this guy Elfman. And we'll import him. The normal method's the same, and I'm going to choose the same skeleton. It's going to take a second because he's got a lot of polygons. Alright, let me just get like a nice, simple material. But he should work with the animations, so let's check it out. Elfman. Right, there we go. And there we go. We've got a fully custom character, fully custom humanoid character into Unreal Engine. So, and he's using the Unreal Engine for Mannequin, which means that he'll work with any animations, right? With any animations that work with the Unreal Engine for Mannequin, right? So let's do a quick recap of what we've covered so far. The thing to really understand is that it's simpler than you think. Okay, you don't need to change anything. I know when you look at this skeleton, for the first time after you've exported it from Unreal Engine, and you're like, this is not what a skeleton should look like. Why are all the bones pointing in weird directions? And why aren't any of the bones connected or anything like that? Okay, and it looks weird. It looks like it shouldn't be like that. But you really, if you want to use the Unreal Engine for Mannequin Skeleton for your custom humanoid character, you really don't need to change anything about the skeleton. And you really shouldn't change anything about the skeleton, because by changing it, like if you just like change the orientation of one of the bones, right? it's going to break all of your animations. So you don't do that, right? Don't do that. Don't edit the skeleton, okay? I haven't changed anything. No, that's fine. So, and you can, add any character mesh you want, right? You can use, you can have this character, um, or you can have the stickman, or you could even have, another character. Let's just get another random character from one of my folders. All right, so I think he's coming with his own skeleton. So I'm just going to delete his own skeleton. But there you go. There's a custom character, like an actual proper character for a game. As my colleague messaging me on Discord. So there's this is an actual custom character. He's got a sorry, excuse me. He's got an armature modifier. I can just add that to root, make that root, make his parent root. Now once again, he's already got all the vertex groups, so he's already been weighted, right? Now I can just select him. My colleague. Right, I can just select him, export him. Sci-fi soldier. Go back into Unreal Engine. And this is all just, once again, it's just shading information. But he's in there, right? There's a sci-fi soldier that we saw there. He doesn't have any textures or anything, but that doesn't matter. And he works with the animations, right? So, that's a proper custom character workflow, and I didn't change anything about the skeleton. I mean, the only thing I changed about the skeleton was that do you remember at the beginning I deleted the empty, and then I deleted the empty, and then I scaled the skeleton up 100 times, and I changed the unit presets to metric and the unit scale to 0.01. So, but that isn't actually an edit to the skeleton, right? So the only edit to the skeleton was scaling up 100 times. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about weighting, right? About vertex groups and weighting. So I'm just going to bring back in the simple. Okay, hang on a second. The simple human male, or the elf male. Remember, he's 100 times too small, so I'll just scale him up 100 times. Now, he's already got vertex groups. Okay, he doesn't have an armature modifier. He doesn't have a parent. And he doesn't have an armature modifier, but he does have vertex groups. Now, imagine that we were doing this for the first time and we were doing it from scratch, right? Like he didn't have any vertex groups. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about one way that you could do that, because obviously if you're making your own custom character, you're going to have to deal with the process of weighting, of doing the weight paints, right? Of assigning bone weights to the mesh to make it work, right? Obviously with this character I've already done it previously, but I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to how to do it from scratch, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete all of these vertex groups so that he no longer has any vertex groups. Alright, so now he's got no vertex groups. If I select him and select that again, and I do Control P with empty groups, and I try to move him, right? I try to move one of his bones. Nothing's going to happen because he's got no he's got vertex groups again, but none of these vertex groups have any. None of these vertex groups have any geometry assigned to them, right? So if I click on upper arm or lower arm L and I click select, there's like nothing there, right? Now, manually manually assigning all of these like polygons to these vertex groups manually can be quite a lot of work. All right. Now I do think it's the best way to do it. Right. It's the way that I generally do it. Is I do it manually. Right. Oops. Don't want to do that. I do generally do it manually myself, but I'm going to show you another technique that's a bit simpler. Okay. So I've just selected those. I want to assign that, and now if I move this, it's going to move with him. Now, obviously his hand isn't attached, but that's fine. Okay. Now I generally do it manually, but there's another way that you can do it. Okay. So I'm just going to remove all his vertex groups again. And I'm going to unparent him and delete the armature modifier. So once again, now we've just got a mesh and a skeleton. I'm going to select the mesh, select the skeleton, Control P. But this time I'm going to do with automatic weights, right? And that basically means that Blender is just going to it's going to run an algorithm that automatically assigns vertex groups and assigns geometry to vertex groups based on the location of the bones and the closeness of the geometry to the bones. Okay, so let's go with that, with automatic weights. Bone weight weighting failed to find solution for specific for some bones. Okay, that just means that it just means that some vertices weren't weighted. Okay, and we're going to have to investigate that. But now he's got vertex groups, and you'll find that it's probably done a reasonably good job of assigning weights to him, or has it not? Hang on a second. Okay, it looks as if it hasn't worked for some reason, which sucks. I'm really sorry about that. Oh, no. Why hasn't it worked? That might be to do with some problems with the mesh. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Let's try with a different one, okay? Because I don't know why that's happened. That's just a bug. Don't worry about it. Let's try with that spy character. Where was he? He's come with his own skeleton. I'm just going to delete that. Okay, so this guy once again has got an armature modifier and he's got vertex groups. So I'm just going to delete all of his vertex groups, so as if we're doing it again from the beginning. So all we have is a mesh and a skeleton. Control P with automatic weights. Now that time it's worked. Okay, I don't know why it didn't work for the other mesh. There was some silly bug with the other mesh. I don't know what it was. I could probably figure it out, but let's not try that for the tutorial. So now I've just reassigned all of the weights to this character, and it will have done a basic job. It should have done a basic job of assigning vertex groups to him. So now, if I rotate that, okay. So as you can see, it's kind of done it's kind of done a job, but it hasn't done a perfect job, right? Because you can see, you know, these other parts are not deforming properly. So what you need to do is you need to go into, you need to basically investigate what the problems are with the weights, right? And the way to do that is to go into weight paint mode. And in weight paint mode, you can select different vertex groups, right? So they've lower arm twist is one, and you can see where the bone influence is assigned. Right, so let's go here. So you can see those are the vertices that are assigned to hand L. Those are the vertices that are assigned to to lower arm underscore L. And in this mode, you can actually change the weighting, right? So we've got it set to, I set it set to mix, I set it to add. You can use mix or add, right, whichever you prefer. And I can change how much I want. Now red means 100% influence, dark blue means 0% influence. Now I'm not suggesting that this is what I'm doing here is good, but you can see that I'm manually manipulating using the brush, right? Weight painting is like, it can be really helpful in some situations, and it's a really useful tool to learn, okay? Another way to do it is by assigning them in edit mode, and we looked at that a little bit earlier on, if you remember, with the stickman. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, now one of the things that I tend to do, no, I want lower arm. See, the thing is the automatic weights have not really done a very good job here, right? They've put a lot of vertices, a lot of geometry into lower arm underscore L that we just really don't want, right? Which is why I kind of suggest doing, adding the weights manually. Okay, so I'm actually going to remove these, right? So there's now nothing inside lower arm L. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roughly select the parts that I want. Okay, and it does require a bit of skill and a bit of practice. You need to get good at this. You need to practice it so that you kind of learn how these systems work. But it does, it does work, right? So, okay, so those are the vertices I want. Okay, oops. Those are the vertices or the geometry I want for lower arm. Now I'm just going to assign it at 100%. Now if we go into weight paint mode. Okay, I've got the wrong group there. Don't worry about that. Let's just ignore that one. You can see it's 100. It's just 100% red. Now the thing is, you don't want it to be 100% red, because that's going to mean that you're just going to get this really sharp deformation. Okay, and one of the tools that I use a lot in assigning weights is this thing called smooth. All right. You can only use it when you've enabled this one option, which I believe is this one. Yes, it is. It's called Vertex Selection Masked for Painting, Weight Paint Only. Now once this is enabled, you can use this option called Smooth, right? And what this is going to do is it's just going to like average out the weights. And I'm going to really, like, it's only done one iteration, so I have a really small effect. I'm just really going to ramp this up to like 100, right? And you can see it's just got this, now it's got this really nice smooth gradient between the parts. Yeah, and it's and that's actually a pretty decent weighting now for this part of the arm, and so I've done that manually by assigning the geometry, selecting the geometry I want, giving it 100% weight to the bone, and then smoothing it out using that technique, right? Now this is all still, this is all still inside Blender 2.8 as well. I'm sure these exact same techniques are in Blender 2.8. They might be in slightly different locations, which you'll have to find, but those techniques are still definitely there. So, I mean, you can use automatic weighting, like I showed you there, but I think the automatic weighting, you're going to find that it doesn't get great results. Like, that's the kind of weights you want for lower arm underscore L, but then like let's take a look at like what we got for lower arm underscore R. It didn't really do what we want, and we got the pouch, in the vertex group, which definitely shouldn't have been in there. So automatic weights cause problems, right? I do recommend fundamentally doing your weight painting manually if you can. Okay. Automatic weights are a good like prototyping or testing tool. Okay, cool. So in this tutorial, we've gone over the whole business of exporting the Unreal Engine 4 Mannequin from Unreal Engine, getting it into Blender, as an FBX, or importing an FBX into Blender with the mannequin. We talked about exporting the mannequin and getting that back into Unreal Engine, and we talked about adding the stickman, and we talked about adding this humanoid character, and then it even talked about a more complex character and how to apply weight painting and so on. I really hope you've all found that helpful. I think the takeaway here is that it's really not as difficult as you might think, and you really don't need to edit the skeleton, and you don't need to use retargeting, animation retargeting in Unreal Engine 4 to get a basic humanoid character to work, pretty much perfectly. Okay. So let's just, right, as you see, that's a custom character. He's got no textures or anything, but that's cool. Okay. So, I really hope this tutorial series has been helpful. I will provide I'll provide the stickman in as a download in the link description. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions in the comments section in the YouTube video. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial, and good luck with your custom characters from Blender to Unreal Engine 4. Alright, take care.